Okay, so let's picture this. You have a vast, ancient empire, the Sassanid Persians, just dripping with power and history. And facing them is an army. But it's not guided by some king who's obsessed with his own glory. Nope, it's led by a man whose authority comes from somewhere completely different. This is the story of a conquest that was defined less by the land it took, and more by the character of the man leading it from far away, Umar ibn al-Khattab. And his character? It was shaped by the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. Let's dive into this incredible story.
To really get who Umar was, you have to start with a story like this. A messenger is racing to the capital, carrying huge news from a major battle. As he's riding, a man starts running alongside his horse, just peppering him with questions, desperate for details. The messenger, totally focused on his mission, kind of brushes him off, saying he'll tell the Caliph first. He has absolutely no idea he's talking to the Caliph. This just tells you everything. It wasn't about status, it was about a genuine, raw desire to serve his people.
In this one quote, it's basically his entire philosophy summed up. After a massive victory, this is what he tells everyone. I am not a king. Think about that. He's saying he's a trustee, that his power is a sacred responsibility given to him by God, not some personal right to do whatever he wants. And this wasn't just a nice-sounding political speech. This idea would shape every single decision that followed.
So the big question is, how do you actually turn a principle like that into a real-world policy? A military strategy even? Well, Umar established what you could call a divine mandate, and it was built on two pillars that he believed were more powerful than any sword or spear.
In a letter he sent to his commander, Umar basically laid down the law. He said, look, in life, God allows for flexibility on a lot of things, but not on two. Number one, justice. And number two, dhikr, which is this constant remembrance and awareness of God. He was crystal clear, there was no situation, no hardship, no excuse that could ever justify compromising on absolute justice or losing your spiritual focus. These weren't just suggestions, they were the core operating system for the entire army.
And this idea of non-negotiable justice, it wasn't just Umar's personal opinion. It came straight from the Quran. The belief was that every single thing you do is being recorded and you will have to answer for it. So for every soldier, every leader, justice wasn't just a good strategy for keeping the peace. It was a matter of eternal personal consequence.
But don't get the wrong idea. This deep spiritual reliance wasn't about just sitting back and waiting for a miracle. No way. It was paired with a direct command from God to prepare for the real world, to be ready. Faith and strategy had to go hand in hand. You put your ultimate trust in God, absolutely, but you also made sure you had every possible material advantage you could muster. It was the perfect blend of the spiritual and the tactical.
And all of this, all these principles and preparations, well, they were all building towards the ultimate test, the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah. This is where this small, incredibly disciplined force would face the full, overwhelming might of the Persian Empire. This was it. Umar's entire philosophy was on the line. You know, just because they were driven by faith didn't mean they forgot about strategy. In fact, their principles drove them to be even smarter. I mean, Umar, from hundreds of miles away, is acting like a modern-day general. He has his commander describe the terrain in such incredible detail, it's like he's looking at a satellite map. They used clever attrition tactics, raiding supply lines to weaken the massive Persian force before the main event. And on the battlefield, they were brilliant. They disguised camels to look like weird monsters to spook the Persian war elephants. And crucially, they focused their attacks on the enemy commander, Rustam, knowing that if he fell, the whole army's morale would shatter. But for all the brilliant military moves, what was really powering them was something else entirely. And this one little incident, wow, it tells you everything you need to know. In the heat of battle, the man who called the army to prayer was killed. Instantly, the soldiers started fiercely competing with each other. Not for treasure, not for glory, but for the honor of being the next one to make the call to prayer. They almost came to blows over it. It just shows you their deepest desire wasn't for anything in this world, but for a reward they believed was waiting for them in the next. That was their real secret weapon.
So, after that massive victory, the army pushed on, heading straight for the Sassanid capital, Al-Madain. But between them and the grand prize stood a barrier that looked absolutely, completely impossible to overcome. I mean, really, put yourself in their shoes for a second. The Persian army you just beat has run away across the gigantic Tigris River, which happens to be flooding like crazy. They took every single boat with them. On the other side is the heavily fortified capital city just sitting there. You have no way to get across. So, what do you do?
Right at that moment of total uncertainty, the commander, Sa'd, has a dream. He sees the army's horses just crossing the wild river. He takes this as a sign from God. Trusting completely in this vision, he gathers his men and gives what has to be one of the most unbelievable orders in military history. Ride your horses straight into the raging flood. They were going to cross relying on faith alone.
And when they make it to the other side and they finally see the legendary white palace of the Persian kings shimmering in the distance, you'd think they'd be stunned by the riches, right? But no. In fact, their commander reminded them that all worldly kingdoms eventually fade. For them, this moment was something else. It was the fulfillment of a prophecy. They exclaimed together, "This is what Allah and His Messenger promised." This wasn't just a lucky conquest. For them, it was destiny.
But you see, taking the palace wasn't the end of the story. In a way, it was just the beginning of the most important part. The real victory here wasn't about what was taken, but about the totally new kind of rule that was put in its place.
Following Umar's direct orders, the new system was a complete 180 from the old one. Where the Sassanids had brutally oppressed the local farmers and peasants, Umar commanded his governors to protect their rights and honor every agreement made. The people were no longer just property of a corrupt elite, they stopped being slaves to other men and, as the sources say, became slaves of Allah alone, equal in the eyes of the law.
And that really leaves us with one last big question. How do you actually measure a victory? Is it about the land you conquer or the palaces you capture? Or is it measured by the principles you live by, the justice you bring, and the character of the society you build afterward? That, right there, is the heart of this conquest of character.